Welcome to this week's Whiteboard Wednesday. My name is Kwan Lin, Senior Data Scientist at Rapid7. Today, I'd like to speak with you about Rapid7's first quarterly threat report for 2018. In this threat report, we take a wide-angle view of data collected by the Rapid7 Heisenberg honeypot cloud network and by our security practitioners in the managed detection and response teams. There were a number of trends that really stood out this time. Each quarter, we take a look at threat event distributions by industry. We noticed that some historically popular targets, such as the financial, professional, and administrative industries, gave way to healthcare as the most frequently targeted industry. The increasing popularity of targeting healthcare is a trend we've noticed since 2015. There's a lot about healthcare that makes it an appealing target. It's an industry that's inherently dependent on difficult-to-secure IT infrastructures, and the industry as a whole retains a huge volume of sensitive financial and personally identifiable information. Many of the most common attack vectors include remote access, suspicious logins, and account leaks. We also took a look at incident frequency types by organization size. As in prior quarters, threat movement and remote entry attempts remain some of the most prominent threat types. For remote entry in particular, we noticed it decreased for large organizations and increased for smaller organizations. In general, this might be a reflection of the fact that larger organizations tend to have more established security functions that focus on addressing exposed systems. There were plenty of vulnerabilities identified this past quarter that allowed remote access, including exposed systems susceptible to the GhostScan SSH malware family. During the quarter, we also observed many cases of legitimate credential usage by illegitimate actors to access services often relied on business operations. While adversaries can obtain these credentials through guessing or brute force attempts, we noticed that many common phishing campaigns were aimed squarely at stealing credentials for such common services as DocuSign, Office 365, and Dropbox, amongst others. Another approach we took with examining the available data was to examine patterns around adversarial actions that triggered multiple alerts. When we broke down these actions into weekly patterns, 2 weeks in particular stood out, neither of which involved any high-profile attacks or vulnerabilities, but rather reflected higher than normal conventional incidents, such as phishing and suspicious login activity. These patterns are consistent with an assertion we have maintained in prior threat reports. Traditional malicious activity is ever present and should not be neglected as potential hazards. We also took a closer look at amplified distributed denial of service attacks. Amplification attacks work by misdirecting service replies to spoofed addresses, which results in a flooding of target systems with unsolicited replies. Attackers through amplification can magnify a single protocol exchange by an order that can be tens of thousands of times more significant, as was the case with the use of memcached as an amplification DDoS protocol. We compared the bandwidth amplification factor, a measure of the ratio of bytes in a service response to bytes sent by attackers, across a range of common amplification-susceptible protocols. We also utilized our Heisenberg honeypot network to monitor for inbound traffic directed at ports related to the common amplification-susceptible protocols, and found a number of spikes over the quarter, as if attackers were taking stock of hosts that were vulnerable to being co-opted to participate in an attack. Additionally, during the quarter, Cisco released a security advisory about vulnerabilities present in the Smart Install, or SMI, feature available in software and select devices, which allows for unauthenticated arbitrary remote code execution. Immediately following the release of the advisory, we observed a significant uptick in malicious activity that appears to be seeking to exploit vulnerable Cisco SMI-enabled devices. There have been a regular series of spikes in activity targeting Cisco SMI-enabled devices ever since. I'll leave you now with some general recommendations on how to better safeguard your environment based on some of our findings from this past quarter. First, if you're in the healthcare industry, take extra care to be vigilant. Our findings indicate they have become an especially popular target for malicious actors. Second, given that threat movement and remote entry attempts were so common, it's worth checking yourself for exposed systems. Close obvious vulnerabilities that allow for easy incursions. Third, be especially wary of credential leaks. Since there is such a concerted effort to collect credentials through phishing, it might be prudent to remind your teams about the dangers of phishing. Fourth, Since our findings indicate that so many threat vectors are through conventional attacks rather than headline-grabbing exploits, continue to watch for the mundane dangers. Fifth, given the heightened threat posed by DDoS amplification attacks, organizations that are particularly concerned about application or network availability should consider bolstering DDoS defense and perform business continuity tests to prepare for DDoS attack scenarios. Finally, organizations that utilize Cisco devices equipped with the SMI functionality should check firewall rules for possible SMI exposure on the public internet. SMI should really only be exposed internally to a very limited audience. We hope that the information we have shared through the Q1 Threat Report for 2018 has provided you with a better sense of the state of security, or rather, anti-security, as of the last few months. Visit rapid7.com to grab a copy of the full report, which includes many more details than what we've discussed here today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at research@rapid7.com. That's it for this week's Whiteboard Wednesday. We'll talk to you next time.